Well, hey guys, we are in our series right now called To the Next Generation, and we're trying to understand who our youth are, like who are coming to our WDS nights, who's coming to our young adult nights. And so it's really important for us to empathize with our students and our young people the way that Christ empathizes with us. And so we took a survey to try to do just that. How can we empathize with these youth, and how can we get to know them better? So we have these results, and let's dig into them together. Awesome.
I think two of the results that we got that were really interesting out of all the statistics we got to kind of look at was that 70% of our young adults and students deal with anxiety, and 60% feel really lonely. Like, just think about that. Like, most of the people that you're in the room with feel anxious and lonely. Like, on a Sunday service, young adults that you pass, students that you pass, are dealing with those very things. So how do we come alongside them? How do we empathize with them? How do we ask questions? How do we actually start to involve ourselves in their life? And that's a really difficult thing to go through in today's world, in today's time. So how do we continue to show more of Jesus' love for them and compassion and empathize with them and start to understand what is making them anxious? Like, why do they feel lonely? Why do they feel like they don't have enough time to do things, or that they can't enjoy the moment because they're so anxious about work or school? So that's one of the things I thought was fascinating, just those two statistics.
Yeah, Brandon, I think one of the interesting things that we could all say on the team is when we got the survey results back and we started looking at the numbers, there was a trend that stood out. It's like, hey, our young people aren't just dealing with one isolated incident with like one or two outliers. No, like when they're dealing with loneliness, they're also wrestling with anxiety that compounds into a deep sense of sadness and depression. And like the interesting thing is that our young people are fighting multiple things simultaneously. Like they are wrestling with all sorts of things at the same time. And it's hard when you have to battle these things in a way where you feel like nobody understands you. In the survey, we asked them an interesting question. We asked, hey, what do you need most from adults right now? And one of the simplest yet most profound answers that we received was simply, I just want adults to lend me a listening ear. And it's so true. If a middle schooler or a high schooler or a young adult is battling with all these things simultaneously and they feel like they have to do it alone, what are you to do with that?
Yeah, and our students and our young adults really need older adults pouring into them and loving them, because another big statistics we found was that 80% of our students and young adults are feeling like they can't meet people's expectations.
Yeah.
They're constantly bombarded with what they should be doing, thinking about things not just now, but in the future, and they're struggling with that. And so they're constantly raising the bar. They're constantly trying to find achievement and success in so many different ways. And instead of saying, hey, my worth is in Jesus, they're realizing the society is telling me my worth is in what I do.
Yeah, and I think with that, a statistic that was also sad to see is over 75% of young people feel like they don't have time to do things that they enjoy. They feel overscheduled. And one conversation that we had, we were asking like, why? Where is this stemming from? And I think it's just like you mentioned, Sarah. A lot of them feel like they can't meet others' expectations. And so they're going to try to fill their time in doing that. Like their extracurricular activities, their sports, whether they're told or not from their parents, society, they feel a pressure to keep up with the standard. And so it's just a cycle that keeps happening, and that leads to more anxiety, to more sadness. And it's just a brutal cycle that it's very sad.
Yeah. And another finding that we found was that the majority of our students, about 85% of our students, not only struggle with anxiety from feeling like they need to meet the expectations or being overachieving or over extending themselves, but also in a fear of the future. And I think a lot of times what happens as adults, we think, oh, because I struggle with that too. Like the students don't really, they don't have as much life that they've lived. They can't experience that as much as I am right now. But the reality is that our students are struggling with the fear of the future. And so if that's the case, we need to meet them where they're at, hear them out, and sit on the curb with them and really just listen to hear what it is that's causing them to have that fear of the future.
Yeah, and I think as you just said, one thing that stood out to me and the whole team is like, these are not just statistics that are happening across the country, across the world. These are our students. These are our young adults. When we think about it, it's not just numbers, but it's people that you see around you. And so like the big question is, what can we do? What can we do as adults? What can we do as the church? And like you said already, I think the biggest thing we can do is be a listening ear. One thing that we can tend to do is say, well, you're just a middle schooler. Like, why are you worried about this? Why are you anxious? And we're just quick to dismiss or try to fix things. But we just have to put ourselves in their shoes. Even all of us here sitting, we might be closer in age to our students than most. But even for us, like, being a middle schooler now is very different when I was a middle schooler. It's changed so much in just a few years. Social media, the technology, the pressure, the news, everything that's happening. So I think what we need to do is ask more questions, like clarifying questions, like, hey, I don't know what it's like to be your age in 2025. Tell me more. And I think that as we do that, as a church, as adults, that's where the change can really happen, and we can be more like Jesus and empathizing and loving our young people well.
Yeah, that's good.